Thomas and friends made the switch from models to CGI in 2009. Ever since, it has introduced some amazing characters. No, not you. And we're surprisingly starting with a character from the Nitrogen era. Hero is an engine that came from Japan. In the CGI canon, he was one of the first engines on Sodor. After what was probably years of faithful work, he broke down. Parts were ordered from his homeland, but they never came. Hero was left in the woods and forgotten about. That is until Thomas found him after his brakes failed, but idiot. Thanks to Thomas, Hero is now a really useful engine again. Master of the railway. There's honestly nothing I can't like about Hero. He's just so interesting. Not only his backstory, but his personality as well. He thinks a lot and takes time to notice things no one else has time to.
When Gordon smiles, it changes his whole face. It is most interesting.
He cares for everyone and everyone cares for him, including the trucks.
Good morning, Diesel. Good morning, trucks.
His friendship with Thomas is amazing as well. Thomas can be a cheeky jerk at times, but with Hero, he's an absolute child. Hero is just always a nice character to see. Victor is a narrow gauge engine that works at the Steamworks. He came all the way from Cuba and almost didn't make it. Luke accidentally knocked him off the boat at Brendam Docks. When he was brought to the Steamworks, he barely ever left. Now he and Kevin work at the Steamworks repairing all steam engines. Victor is always interesting to see. In Hero the Rails, his debut movie, you immediately get who he is. Not only does he fix engines, but he's always willing to help out another engine, give advice, or stand up for another.
Do you have a job to do, Spencer? Or are you just going to stand here gossiping? You're taking up a lot of track.
He's also great in Blue Mountain Mystery. His backstory gives him so much more character. One more thing I want to mention is Snow Place Like Home. This episode gives a great example of his friendship with Kevin and his hatred for snow. The snow aspect is the best example of cultural origins in the whole show. I think Victor is very underrated and deserves to be talked about more. Marion doesn't really have a backstory, but that's okay. She debuted in Tale the Brave and became a constant character until the end of the show. Marion is definitely the crazy lady of the cast. She's always talking about digging and what she's dug up, even if it's not true sometimes.
Just some more pirate treasure. It's quite common on Sodor.
I thought you said it was a Viking longship.
But when we do see her find something, it's a real treat. And despite being crazy, she can also be sensible, especially when she's paired up with Bill and Ben.
Timothy! Come back here! Oh.
And I can't go without mentioning that she's voiced by the legendary Olivia Colman from her debut all the way to season 23. Unfortunately, she didn't come back for season 24, but Lucy Montgomery does a great job doing an impression. I think the best way to describe Marion is simply fun. And here, we have another Nitrogen character. Although this time it's not about what the Nitrogen era did with him. This is about what Andrew Brenner did with him. Starting from Blue Mountain Mystery, Paxton has also been a constant character. He's a kind diesel that gives them a good name, but he can also be very airheaded. He has an interesting dynamic with Thomas. Brenner seemed to love this dynamic, as well as Percy and Sydney. Speaking of Sydney, he and Paxton also make a very entertaining pair. There's also his dynamic with Diesel. Throughout any appearance with him, Paxton tries to be Diesel's friend, though it rarely works, let alone permanently. He definitely gave up in the Big World era though.
You give Diesels a bad name!
I'm so glad Brenner actually decided to work with Paxton and turn him into what would become a fan favorite character. This one is probably a surprise to some of you. Bradford is a brake fan from the mainland. He clearly has a love for the railway rules and regulations, and always makes sure the other engines follow all of them. The fandom's love for Bradford is funny to me because he's a character that the engines don't like in the slightest. He only appeared in 2 episodes, and I think that's all he needed. I wish he'd gotten toys though, something Mattel seemed to have a hard time with. Imagine if we got the hit era treatment with Bradford. We could have gotten so many great toys. It was clear though that Bradford was made simply for a fun episode. It's unfortunate though that he was paired up with the worst Brunner era character. That'll be another video. And now we're into the top 5. Starting off, we have Skiff. This little railboat got the honor of making his debut in the Best Thomas movie. He's voiced by Jamie Campbell Bower, who also continues voicing him throughout the whole rest of the show. He's a character with a fun backstory too. Until the end of Lost Treasure, Skiff is manipulated by Sailor John to help steal treasure. But once he learns John's real intentions, he stands up against him, almost sacrificing himself to stop him. He also has a fun little dynamic with the Little Western engines, who initially thought he was just a tiny little railboat.
Yes, we're not tiny little railboats.
His appearance is very unique, and makes him stand out from everyone else. He also makes for great visual gags. Now this one is definitely a surprise to at least half of you. Who would have thought a big world character would make it to this list? I think Sunny's very underrated. People seem to think that his dynamic with Baz and Bernie is the same as Skiff and Sailor John. That's just wrong. Skiff was manipulated, while Sunny knew what he was doing. He only realized what he was doing was wrong when he came to Sodor and Thomas taught him the true idea of being really useful. I love his Spotlight episode as well. I think it was genius to make some of the engines still not like Sunny until he truly proved himself worthy. Sunny feels like such a natural character in the Thomas universe. One of the few Big World exclusive characters that was actually used. Glyn is the coffee pot engine that used to look after the Farquhar branch line. He was left in a siding for years until Marion found him. Oh, kind of. Thomas and Percy ended up actually finding him behind a tree and helped him to be restored. He now works at Ulfstead Castle. His backstory alone makes him such an interesting character. Most of what I love about Glyn is not even from his entertaining personality. Not only is he based on something all the way back from the Railway series days, but his first episode states that Sir Topham Hatt built him.
I must say, Glyn, you look as splendid as the day I built you.
My favorite of his screen time, though, is when he's with Steven. Speaking of Steven, he's number 2. He was one of the first things Brenner ever gave us, and man is he a treat. I love that he always mentions his winning of the Rainhill Trials. His dynamic with Glyn and Millie is also amazing. The Ulfstead crew is one of my favorite character groups in the whole show. They're just so fun to watch. Pair Steven with any character, and it's amazing. Steven also gets a spotlight in the most intense CGI episode ever. Just thought I'd mention that. Before we go to number 1, let me put up my honorable mentions. Number 1 CGI character, we have Ryan. I love Ryan. Ryan is a very kind engine. He works hard every day and makes sure that everyone else around him is happy as well. I know it sounds bland from a short description like that, but here's where he's more interesting. He's not just kind, he's a pushover. This can lead him to being manipulated by the wrong engine and doing things that he shouldn't.
With the passenger coaches behind him and Daisy's mail truck in front, Ryan couldn't see where he was going.
Look out!
He's also not the smartest. He has a hard time understanding when someone is tricking him. For this, we need to look at Ryan and Daisy, but I'll look into that episode in another video later on. This episode perfectly depicts Ryan and his character. I think pairing Ryan with other characters makes for some great stories. Ryan is my absolute favorite CGI character, and I don't think that's gonna change anytime soon.